Am I the a-hole for wanting to dump my fiancée after she injured herself while I was away? While I, 30M, was away on business, my fiancée, 32F, decided to go out without telling me. We spoke briefly in the afternoon while I was on my way to the airport, ahead of an 8-hour flight that was scheduled to land at 5 a.m. Her friend had just returned from out of state, and she was planning on taking her out to dinner. I remember feeling relieved that she was catching up with a friend, something that she hadn't done in a while. She seemed excited about it, which made me happy for her. Once I landed, it was late, and I didn't want to disturb her since she normally gets up around 7 a.m. I got home, exhausted from the long flight, and found that she wasn't there. Her car was parked outside, but she wasn't in bed. My initial thought was that she might have gone to surprise me at the airport and I missed her, but that didn't make sense. Her car was right outside. I began to panic slightly and called her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried calling 10 more times while I showered and changed into something more comfortable, hoping she would pick up. At first, I wasn't overly worried. I thought maybe she went for a run or decided to grab a late-night coffee. But as the minutes ticked by, my anxiety grew. The scenarios running through my head grew darker and more unsettling. I found myself pacing around the apartment, feeling the weight of unease pressing down on me. We have our phones synced through iCloud for convenience in case we lose them or need to locate each other. So I decided to use it to find her location. When I brought up her location on my phone, my heart sank into my stomach. Her iPhone was at the hospital. I didn't understand what could possibly be happening. The hospital was just 10 minutes away, but those minutes felt like an eternity. I sped through traffic, ran red lights, and parked right in front of the emergency department door. I dashed inside, barely able to catch my breath, and frantically demanded that the triage staff tell me where my fiancée was. They seemed taken aback by my frantic state but guided me to her room. When I finally saw her, the sight was gut-wrenching. She was asleep in bed, but her face was marred with injuries. Her lip was swollen, and she had what appeared to be multiple bruises on her face. There was a splint on her nose, and she looked like she'd been through a terrible ordeal. My panic and worry swiftly morphed into a deep, simmering rage. I wanted answers immediately. I demanded to know what happened and who was responsible for this. A nurse informed me that she had arrived at the hospital in an ambulance at around 2 a.m. The story she gave was that she had drunkenly stumbled and face-planted onto the curb while leaving a bar. The injuries included a broken nose, a chipped tooth, and various minor abrasions and scratches. Fortunately, the nurse assured me that she would be fine, though she was in for a rough few days. The explanation made absolutely no sense to me. I felt like I was living in some twisted version of reality. I don't drink. It's never been my thing. And she hadn't touched alcohol since college, to my knowledge. Her story about being pressured into drinking wine and somehow ending up at a bar, with no recollection of how she got there, was bewildering. I felt like I was in the twilight zone. I struggled to process the information. The whole situation seemed so out of character for her. How did we get here? I tried to piece together the fragments of what had happened. She tried to explain, saying that her friend had persuaded her to have a glass of wine, and from there, things spiraled out of control. But her explanations felt flimsy, as though she was grasping at straws to make sense of something that was inherently chaotic. I couldn't make sense of it. I had been giving her the silent treatment since I arrived at the hospital, and now it was 8 p.m. She had been crying and seeking some sort of consolation or reassurance, but I was emotionally drained. I felt like my capacity for empathy was depleted. This whole situation had come out of left field, and I didn't know how to handle it. I was overwhelmed with feelings of betrayal, confusion, and sadness. We had been living together since we got engaged, and now the prospect of a breakup felt daunting. Her parents owned the house we were living in, which meant that if I decided to leave, I could basically just pack up my things and go. But it was more complicated than that. We had built a life together over the past year and a half, and I couldn't ignore the fact that this relationship had been a significant part of my life. I questioned whether we could ever get past this. The emotional roller coaster had sapped away the love I once felt for her. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a decision that would change everything. The days following the incident were a whirlwind of emotion and turmoil. My fiancé and I tried to talk things through, but the conversations often ended in frustration and more confusion. We tried to rebuild some semblance of normalcy, but it was clear that the trust between us had been irrevocably damaged. I struggled to reconcile the person I thought I knew with the reality of what had happened. The emotional weight was heavy, and it was difficult to see a path forward. As time passed, the situation with my fiancé grew more strained. We continued to have conversations about our relationship, but they were increasingly filled with tension. She felt that I was being cold and unsupportive, while I felt betrayed and lost. She expressed that my expectations were unrealistic and that she needed someone who could accept her flaws and failures. I found myself questioning whether I was the right person for her and whether our relationship could truly recover from this crisis. In the end, we decided to break off the engagement. It was a difficult decision, but one that seemed inevitable given the circumstances. Our relationship, which had once been filled with promise and hope, had become a source of constant stress and unhappiness. The breakup was painful, but it was also a step toward finding clarity and resolution. One night, shortly after our breakup, I found myself at her parents' place. It was an uncomfortable reminder of the life we had planned together. Her father had given me a watch as a gift shortly after our engagement. It wasn't for any special occasion. He had simply taken it off his wrist and said, "I want you to have this." I had never really given it much thought until now. I had recently had it appraised and discovered that it was worth over $70,000. The thought of keeping it or returning it weighed heavily on me. Her father lived in California, and I resided in New York. The likelihood of seeing him again was slim, and neither he nor my ex had asked for the watch back. I was torn between keeping it as a reminder of the relationship and returning it as a gesture of respect. I doubted that my ex had any real understanding of its value, but it felt wrong to keep something that wasn't mine to begin with. As I reflected on this decision, I realized it was more than just about the watch. It was about closure and moving forward. The watch had become a symbol of the relationship that was now in the past. I needed to make a choice that aligned with my values and allowed me to move on with a clear conscience. Returning the watch felt like a way to honor the past and acknowledge the significance of the gift while also embracing the reality of our separation. Ultimately, I reached out to her father to explain the situation. I expressed my intention to return the watch and offered to send it back to him. To my relief, he was understanding and appreciative of my honesty. He reassured me that the watch was not about its monetary value but about the gesture and the connection it represented. Returning the watch provided a sense of closure and allowed me to move forward with a clearer mind. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life and finding new sources of fulfillment. I reconnected with old friends, pursued new hobbies, and took steps to advance my career. The process of healing was ongoing, but each day brought new opportunities for growth and self-discovery. The pain of the breakup gradually faded, and I began to embrace the future with a renewed sense of hope and resilience. Looking back, I realized that the journey through this tumultuous period had taught me valuable lessons about myself and about relationships. I learned the importance of communication, trust, and self-awareness. I came to understand that sometimes, the end of a relationship is not a failure but a stepping stone to personal growth and new beginnings. The future remained uncertain, but I faced it with a sense of optimism and readiness. The experiences of the past had shaped me into a stronger and more self-assured person. I knew that life would continue to bring challenges and changes, but I was prepared to meet them with a clear mind and an open heart. The past, with all its complexities and emotions, was now a part of my journey, but it no longer defined me. I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, knowing that I had the strength and resilience to navigate the twists and turns of life.